Good morning and welcome to the April 20th Transportation Infrastructure and Planning Subcommittee. We had a few technical problems, so please excuse us for the delay. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we will have call to the public. Prior to that, Dave Benton will give us a brief statement.
Morning, council members. David Benton with the Law Department. With regards to citizen comment, during citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona open meeting law permits subcommittee members to listen to the comments but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Thank you.
Madam Chair, looks like you're on mute.
Sorry about that. You would think by now, after 2 years, I would learn to unmute. The first order of business is approval of the minutes of the February 16th TIP meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move the motion.
Second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We have 2 items on consent, and I'll take a motion. And I do believe we have a speaker on one of them, but let's go ahead and make the motion.
I move the consent action items 2 through 3.
Second.
And we have a speaker for item 3 who is opposed.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we have 1 member of the public registered to speak on item 3 in opposition. Their name is Nick Reedy. Nick, are you on the line? Nick is not on the line.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then items 4 through 6 are for information only. Does anyone have any questions? Then we'll move to item 7. This is Maricopa County Regional Flood Control Update.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Members of the subcommittee, thank you. We do have a lot on the agenda today, so staff will work very hard to present the items quickly so that we can get through all the items that we have. For this item, Maricopa County Regional Flood Control item, Joe Judice, the Public Works Director, is here along with a special guest from Maricopa County Flood Control District. The Director of the District, Michael Fulton, is here to present along with Joe. And so I'll turn it over to Joe Judice.
Good morning, Chairwoman Stark, members of the subcommittee. So Maricopa County and the City of Phoenix have and continue to experience tremendous growth over the years, and investment in flood control infrastructure is an important investment in order for protection of our community. Joining me here, as Mario mentioned, is Director of the Flood Control District of Maricopa County, Michael Fulton, and I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and he's going to share with the subcommittee both the partnership that Phoenix and the County Flood Control District have, as well as what the County Flood Control District's role is with respect to flood control infrastructure.
Thank you. And Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairwoman Stark, members of the subcommittee. I appreciate you having us here. We always like to share with communities that are members of the district what our purpose is, and also how we work together with the communities to relieve flooding hazards all throughout the county and the district. I've not seen I have a bit of a summary here today in the slide presentation, but the staff summary provided to you by your own staff, I am very impressed with its how it was written, and it is a very good summary of what we do. I'm just going to add a few things to that here today and leave some time for questions. We'll talk about our history and mission, where we get our money. We've had a rich history of partnerships with the city, as we've talked about, as Joe talked about, and then some opportunities as we look ahead. We were formed in 1959. as a regional flood control agency, we do work with communities to reduce risk from flooding so that we can minimize property damage, mostly focused on occupied structures, homes and businesses, and of course working to minimize loss of life. We have a role in supporting safe and responsible economic development. Joe touched on that. We have a role in just about every new development in the county. And more recently, we have come to recognize stormwater not as a waste product, but as a resource for the long-term benefit of the community and the environment. So we have many multi-purpose projects that help us reach that objective. So here's the big things we do. We build and maintain structures. We have a lot of regional structures throughout the county, channels, basins, and storm drains. These support and are actually depended on by road systems, highways, and developments for the drainage. So we have a big role to play in assisting with transportation development throughout the county. They drain into these channels, basins, and storm drains. We operate and maintain a number of dams throughout the county. We spend a lot of our resources identifying and delineating floodplains so that the development can stay out of harm's way in the first place. That's the cheapest flood control ever, is to stay out of the floodplain in the first place. So we delineate and identify hazards. We issue permits for development in those floodplains. It's not impossible to develop in floodplains, but there are some requirements that need to be met. So we issue permits for that. And then we have an alert and outreach system, series of weather stations, et cetera, around the county that help communicate the flood threats and storms. This shows you for the FY22 where our tax revenues come from. We have a secondary property tax rate of $17.92 right now per thousand, and this shows you by city within the county where the revenues derive based on property values. 25.5 million of the nearly 80 million comes from properties valued in the city of Phoenix. So that's just for comparison, so you can see the relative contribution to the city. It's about 32% of the total levy comes from the city of Phoenix properties. These are the studies I spoke of. We identify hazards and then work with cities and towns to prioritize projects that could fix existing flood hazards or to avoid hazards in the first place. And so a lot of those studies lead to projects that come to us in our capital improvement program. And we pay for all of those studies, no expectation of contribution from cities. Here's our big money programs, the CIP, again focusing on regional solutions, and those regional drains and storm drains and basins do support development throughout the county. They do support transportation infrastructure development and other regional flood hazards. We enter IGAs with cities. There's a 50-50 cost share expectation going into a conversation about a project that we're going to build unless otherwise approved by the board. And we often deviate from that 50-50 depending on board interest and other factors of a project. And of course, the city and town has to agree to operate and maintain projects in perpetuity. And then we proceed only when the city's ready. And then we do so through an IGA. Some structure types here of all shapes, basins, dams, channels, just to give you a bit of an idea of the size of these regional structures. And we have a small project assistance program, which has been very popular with cities. This is mostly in urban areas where regional projects wouldn't be practical. These are infill kind of projects. They're smaller. We look at partnering with cities to look at mitigating actual or potential structure flooding. We don't look very much at road flooding only, so that is something that is a bit of a constraint on the program, but it's been a very popular program with the cities. Just recently, we upped the amount of funds that the district would contribute to these projects from $250,000 to $500,000, and we're also now covering project design, which wasn't covered before. And the cities are responsible for all those items listed here, including operation and maintenance when the project is done. And again, those proceed under IGAs. So just an example of some of the City of Phoenix projects. There's a handout that was provided to you all that gives a bit more detail. But as Joe said, we have a long history of working with the city to build projects throughout. And this handout really only covers the last 10 years. And we could go back even further, but this is what we had room for. And many small projects completed, many capital improvement projects, and over $600 million in total investment since over that period of time. And we have about $100 million in projects in process right now with the City of Phoenix. And we have studies that we're completing with cooperation with the city. 7 have been completed very recently, and we have a couple coming up that we work with your city staff to complete. We also operate and maintain these regional projects that we're not partnered with the city. The ACDC is a great example. No financial participation required. And that is an aging piece of infrastructure that we are investing in to make sure it stays functional and safe for the public. We just completed about a $6 million fence replacement for the entire stretch. So that benefits the entire region. And we're doing some landscaping improvements along the ACDC, some on our own and some in partnership with the cities along the ACDC, including Phoenix. We have an alert network. This is our how we notify folks of the storms as they're coming. You can see the network is not just in Maricopa County, but it stretches into other surrounding counties and watersheds so that we can get an idea of where the storms are, where the flows are coming in, and participate in emergency response notifications. There's about 54 of those stations within the city limits of Phoenix. Many of them are co-located with city structures that you own, dams, etc. So that information is provided to the city to help understand the operation of those structures during storms. Here's where we got, obviously we have some challenges but opportunities. It's been well documented that the flood control needs might exceed available funding both at the district and the city level. Some cities are having trouble meeting their cost share challenges, or cost shares. Not many cities have actually a dedicated funding source for these projects. The City of Phoenix has been very creative in bringing cost share to the table for building projects. So through that creativity, the city is still a very active participant in CIP and SPAP. Infrastructure is aging, so I think we're going to have to look at pivoting some of our investment into not new things, but taking care of what we already own. Not unusual. The same for your streets programs. We have opportunities to continue to get multi-benefit from projects. We have a lot of park space that is within the City of Phoenix and communities throughout the district where these flood control projects are also used for open space. And then, of course, what does the future hold? Are we designing our structures to meet the future rainfall that we might expect, not only in intensity but quantity? That's something we do look to when we're building our regional projects. We do build in some resiliency to that. But it's very hard for us to really gauge and understand with a lot of detail how climate change will impact our designs for future projects and how we might retrofit our existing ones. So these are challenges. I think one thing I will mention on all these programs, and we actually completed a survey in 2020 of all the cities within the district, including the City of Phoenix. And asked broad questions about all of these programs and asked how we might better meet the needs of the community. We have those results have come to us, and we are actually going to work with our Flood Control Advisory Board, of which the city is a member, to consider some of these questions about CIP and SPAP and our study programs to see if there are things we can do to better meet the needs of the community and with respect to funding and eligibility of types of projects that we would be willing to partner on. So that is going to be happening this summer, and the city has a member on our FCAB, and we're looking forward to that input. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Michael. And Chairwoman, just to wrap up, you've expressed an interest in diving in a little deeper on the small project assistance program.
Yes.
And so it was our intent today to give you just some basic information about the things that the Flood Control District does. It's also our intent to come back at your request and cover that small project assistance program with you in more detail and answer questions about that as well. So with that, we will take any questions or direction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I'm happy to see that the Flood Control District has increased the amount that they give for the small grant assistance program. I do want to have a discussion, though, and perhaps our city staff meets with county staff first to talk about some of the criteria that you use for your assistance program. I know you don't want to dive into the roadway issues, but I kind of think we should. I know it doesn't rain here a lot, but when it does, our roads are severely impacted. And I think it's a great program, and I want to make sure the city of Phoenix gets its fair share. I get that the flood control builds big infrastructure. They may build a dam in Peoria that helps Phoenix, but still, I want to make sure we're getting our fair share of the assistance money. As you saw on one of the slides, we are the greatest contributor to the flood control district. But I do want to reevaluate some of the criteria, and I know that there are lots of areas in the city of Phoenix that are in need of this assistance. We did a project off of Shaw Butte, and thank you to the Flood Control District. We partnered with them and APS and successfully addressed an issue of runoff coming off the preserve. So I hope that maybe city staff can work with county staff and we can discuss a little bit further the criteria. And again, I'm just trying to make sure we get our fair share. And I know I'm sure that the Flood Control District hears that from every city, but I think the criteria we need to reevaluate. So with that, does anyone else have any questions?
So I agree on the criteria, but the other thing, as we spoke, as the chairwoman Stark spoke about, is when we do get rain, it pours. And a lot of the central city neighborhoods get flooded due to our infrastructure and floodplains. I will give you an example. The neighborhood I live in was considered a floodplain and required flood insurance. And then I guess through time and evaluation, now it's not considered a floodplain. However, we still get flooded when it rains 3 or 4 inches and our drains are overloaded. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think that also has to be a bigger conversation. I know in North Phoenix, South Phoenix, and even part of Levine, West Phoenix, those areas of growth, some of those areas have, just to the nature of homes here, homes there, home there, then create a whole flood situation, in particular 35th Avenue and baseline to the mountain, where it was residents who had to keep coming year after year after year to demonstrate the flooding and the effects of it. And finally, county and the city really took a hard look at that, but it had to take those residents constantly pounding on our doors saying, look, this is what's happening. So I'm not saying it's anybody's fault or anything, but these are things I'm glad that we're working together, not that you haven't, but to really come with solutions to help the county and the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Chairwoman Stark,
Yes.
I would agree with you. I'd like to know more about the flooding of the streets as well, especially from being up north. It's just substantial impact when we get rain, and I realize it's not often, but when it comes, it is fast and furious and very impactful to our community members. So thank you for asking for that, and I would like to hear back.
Thank you. And I believe we're going to probably pursue a bond election next year, and we'll probably have flooding issues in that. But I do want to make sure we're partnering with the flood control district. They do excellent work. And I just want to have that discussion of reevaluating some of the criteria. So that with that, is there any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much. And again, Mike, thanks a lot for taking your time out of your busy schedule to come and join the City of Phoenix.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next item is item 8, and we will have some speakers on this item. So I believe, Mr. Benton, you have another statement to read regarding agenda items for registered speakers before item 8 starts.
Madam Chair, I do. Thank you. Members of the public may speak on up to 2 minutes and comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. The council and staff cannot discuss or comment on any matters related to any pending litigation or pending claims. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, Keeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee.
You.
Glad to be here today to talk and provide an update on our micromobility program. As you all know, that we had a presentation on this topic back in October of last year. And we're going to give you a little bit of an update where we are with our scooter program, which has been in operation since September 2019, which is before it was pre-pandemic. At our last presentation in October, we heard from the subcommittee members requesting additional outreach, and we provided results of that outreach in the report. We're not going to necessarily come over, in the interest of time, go over that outreach in the presentation today. The item before you today is for action. It is a request to recommend City Council approval to move forward with a request for proposals to be able to implement a proposed comprehensive micromobility program. With me today is Brianna Velez, our Assistant Director. She's going to take you through the majority of the presentation. But before I turn it over to her, I'm going to provide a brief summary where we've been. So we're currently in the 4th phase of our scooter pilot program in the downtown area. We began, as mentioned, in September 2019, and we had several extensions between then and now, and we're operating on an extension that will take the scooter pilot or scooter program through March of 2023. And as just a reminder, the map on the right-hand side shows the operating boundaries of the scooter program. There are designated parking locations in the downtown area as part of the scooter program. Sidewalk riding is prohibited, and we had 2 vendors operating on the previous phase of this. In the last extension, we were asked to include additional vendors, and so Bird and Lime have reapplied to be entered the pilot program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brianna.
Thank you, Keeney. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of this subcommittee. I'm just going to quickly highlight some data from our Phase 3 of the e-scooter pilot program. In Phase 3, we saw a total of approximately 78,000 trips, which was about 238 trips per day. We saw about 185 scooters deployed daily with an average trip distance of about 1.3 miles and an average trip time of about 14 minutes, and no collisions were reported in Phase 3. As Keeney mentioned, we wanted to extend the community outreach, so we did that in November of 2021. We utilized 2 methods. One was in-person tabling events at several community events that were along the proposed expansion area. In addition to, we did an online survey for about 4 weeks. With the community outreach, we received approximately 200 survey responses, as well as we had over 800 dot poll interactions at those in-person events. Some of the key takeaways from the outreach we received was strong support for larger boundary expansion, as well as to include additional vehicle types beyond scooters, such as pedal bikes, traditional bikes, and adaptive vehicles, and that the community was really looking for more supportive bike infrastructure such as bicycle parking as well as bicycle lanes. So there are 4 key components for the proposed shared micromobility program. The first being the operational phase. And so staff is proposing an expansion of the operational boundaries beyond the downtown area, but we're really recommending this be done in phases. You know, the city is currently in the process of developing a Vision Zero roadway safety action plan, and that plan will identify strategies and improvements that will help reduce serious injuries and fatalities on our Phoenix streets. And so we recognize that an expansion of the operational boundary as well as additional devices could have negative impacts to our roadway safety efforts. So we really are focused on doing this in phases. We are proposing the phase shown here in the light blue area. And as we progress with the roadway safety action plan, potentially in the future, we could come back with recommendations to expand that in the future. The other component is the parking requirements. We are recommending to maintain the parking corral requirements within the downtown core. That has worked very well for us, but we also recognize with the proposed expansion that we're not able to implement that. So we are recommending the lock to requirement outside of the downtown core, where it has to be locked to vertical infrastructure. This would require deployment of additional bicycle parking as well, racks so that people can lock to, and that will really help with any sidewalk clutter associated with the expansion. We're also looking at vehicles and fleet sizes. So we are recommending to move beyond just electric scooters. There was a lot of interest in electric bikes as well as pedal bikes and adaptive vehicles. We are recommending a cap on the e-scooters. Those seem to be very popular, so 1,500 per vendor for a total of 3,000, and also identifying minimums for both e-bikes, pedal bikes, and adaptive bikes. So a new facet of the micromobility program is equity, and so we think this is something that we're seeing across the nation in terms of micromobility programs, and a key component that needs to be included. And so we're looking to have requirements associated with distribution, so equity zones, to make sure that they're not just deploying in very specific areas. We're also requesting that they provide payment systems for individuals without a smartphone or credit card or bank account. And that they also, the vendor, provide reduced rates for individuals living on low incomes. So as we look at the request for proposal evaluation criteria, it's really important that the vendors, that their goals align with the city's goals. And so we've identified some key criteria that will be evaluated as part of the proposals, and that would be the scope of work, the company's experience in project teams, operational and technical requirements, the equity component that I just discussed. Education and community outreach is also very key, as well as data sharing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kini.
Thank you, Brianna. So really the next steps we're looking right now is to secure vendors to operate through a micromobility program, and do that through an RFP, a request proposal procurement process. And then at the same time, we're going to work on the staff side to implement and increase public bike parking in the micromobility area that we'd be expanding into. So the action before you today is to recommend City Council approval for us to move forward with a phased implementation of a comprehensive micromobility program through the issuance of a request for proposal. With that, we'll be happy to entertain any questions the subcommittee members may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Kini. We have a couple speakers. Should we take the speakers first, or? Okay, perfect. Could you introduce the speakers, please?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we have 2 members of the public on the line. The first one is Phuong Bui, who is registered in support. Phuong, are you on the line?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Phuong Bui, and I represent SPIN, one of the operators participating in the pilot. We want to thank staff and support their proposal to pursue a permanent program via a competitive RFP, inclusive of boundary expansions, equity requirements, as well as multiple form factors to really better serve residents and visitors. Thank you for your time.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, our next speaker is Cindy Gahn. Cindy, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairwoman Stark, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to speak in support of this issue for the RFP for the proposed phased expansion of the comprehensive micromobility program. For the record, my name is Cindy Gahn, Senior Director of Phoenix Community Alliance, speaking on behalf of its board and members. And I want to thank Keeney and the street staff for conducting the required community outreach on this program, and to express our gratitude for amending the ordinance to include e-bikes, adapted vehicles, and also allowing Bird and Lime to re-enter the program. A majority of people surveyed, about 60% actually preferred the expansion boundaries, and of those preferring the expansion, the 2-mile option was overwhelmingly more popular. If we build our cities for bicyclists, the bikes will come. If we build our city focusing on cars, cars will come. In-person feedback was even more supportive than online responses, noting the desire within our communities for the options. Pedal bike and e-bike options are also desperately needed, and we appreciate that. We know that this is both anecdotally and also now from the survey data that people want a variety of those multimodal options. And the equity portion, I think, is also a welcome addition. We ask that council not so tightly rein in this program as to hamper its viability. Micromobility must be allowed to operate in Phoenix, and it already has in the form of our bicycling community for a long time. These devices should be ridden on streets, but our streets also need to be safe to ride them on. So protected infrastructure for bicycles and also scooters, whether owned or shared, should be the norm for our urban core. I just want to thank you for your time and consideration, and also your service to our city. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I think that's all the speakers. Are there any questions? Councilwoman Guardado?
Thank you, Chairwoman. So thank you guys for that presentation. I guess I know Keeney, you and I have talked about this before. So just for the record, I'm in support of this plan. I think this is great. I think that, I like the plan. I know this is something that Vice Mayor has been working really hard on. So I'm very supportive of this. But just in the lens of equity, I know that we are working on the canal phase 4 out in Maryvale, and we have a lot of people in that area that I think would truly benefit from having scooters or bikes to be able to ride on the canal. We have a lot of families there who have 2 or 3 jobs, and are making decisions whether they're gonna pay for rent or pay for food, and not able to purchase, not even the thought of being able to purchase a bike. And there's a lot of children. Maryvale is the youngest village in the city of Phoenix. So I, would like to see it, not right now, but maybe in the future. And once we break ground in Maryvale with phase 4, that we can open the conversation again about bringing the scooters out to Maryvale, and the bikes, just because I know that that's something that I think people out in the district would really appreciate.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Guardado, I think that what you bring up is a great point. I know when we did our public outreach in the fall, we focused on that 2-mile boundary around the high-capacity transit corridors where existing on future light rail would be. But I think you bring up a really great point about that we probably should have included in there was our improvements and our investments in our canalscape projects, both on the Grand Canal and also another one under design in Western Canal in District 8. So I think that's something that we can definitely incorporate as part of any phased expansion of this micromobility program. So that is something we'll keep at top of mind. Thank you.
And then the only thing I would ask with that is then to also think about, I can see some of these things landing in the canal, and then, just how do we, figure some of those things out as well. I think that, we should look at it from a very comprehensive lens in terms of how do we keep people safe in the canals? How do we keep the scooters and the bikes out of the canals? And, I think that every area is a little bit unique. So I would also ask for you guys to think about how is it that we would deal with those challenges, because we know those are things that we might have to deal with. But given the folks that we've talked to in the district, they'd be very supportive of this. So at some point, we should plan on doing some outreach as we're doing the outreach for Canalscape Phase 4, and just figure out to see what type of support we have out there. I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, if it's done right, you actually have eyes on the canal and you activate the canal. So, But I agree, we need to get your phase in order and then we can review it. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, Vice Mayor.
I have comments in particular of the canal. As Councilwoman Guardado stated, I would like to know the plan in bikes, scooters, or anything else end up in the canal, who's going to be paying for that? The challenges that I have in the canal right now are carts, any type of debris, and when we call SRP, it becomes a back and forth of when these items get removed from the canal. Because it's used sometimes as a dumping area. So when you bring all this back, I would like to know what the cost is of these pieces. In that sense, I do support the phase of phasing and testing the pilot program on the canal in District 5, but I would like to know, I think these are some of the things, nuances we have to talk about in phasing in these pieces. The other struggle that we're having right now on the canal with some of the residents is people lingering on the canal and the safety piece. And so I want to make sure that whatever activity, because there's more activity on there is definitely needed, but when there's more activity, also what's the safety piece and how do we ensure that our residents are safe on the canal? I really appreciate the fact that that you recognize that we are in the midst of the development of comprehensive Vision Zero road safety plan. So I would like to see that finished before, and the strategies and the improvements to reduce serious injuries and fatalities before we even start expanding further. And the Lot 2 requirement, I would like to understand that because I could see people locking to anything if they can. And so how are we going to maintain that piece and keep our sidewalks and everywhere right-of-ways safe, or we'll use some right-of-ways, but we don't really have large sidewalks for pedestrians and other items on the sidewalk, especially if we're parking on them. So these are just items that I think we need to think of. Sometimes we have to put a pilot on to then see what the issues are and then go back and retool it. But thank you for understanding, because you know how I am about micro mobility at this moment and wanting to make it safe all the way around for whoever, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, those that are using these items, and then also the motorists. So I think we have to think collectively and holistically. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Are there any other questions? Well, I think as far as the canals, one of the nice features, especially up in the Sunny Slope area, is that we have the bike squad in Desert Horizon. And perhaps if we start looking at a phase program in Maryville, they too could perhaps get a bike squad to help ensure safety. Just a thought. There, and you know, Laura, you know I love the bike squad.
No, I agree with you, because I was an advocate for the bike squad on light rail.
Yeah.
But I do feel as we phase in, yes, we should incorporate and place dollars behind that a bike squad too on the I think on all of the canal.
Yeah, absolutely. Councilwoman Guardado?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said. Kini, I think we should also see what are the good practices in the other cities like Tempe, Scottsdale, because I don't think that we be the first ones to put these on the canals. So maybe we should go and figure out what is it that they're doing right and also what they're doing wrong, and how can we get somewhere in the middle, because it's being done in other places. So I'm sure, just to address a lot of the concerns that have been said today, I agree with all the concerns and everything that's been said. So let's figure out what is it that other cities are doing that we can learn from, and what are some of the things that they did that we don't want to repeat in Phoenix. Thank you.
Those are good suggestions. Are there any other comments? Then can I get a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it unanimously. Our next item is the downtown interactive kiosk, and I guess we're going to have Kini remain, and Chris is joining you, I believe.
Yes, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We're here today to discuss downtown interactive digital kiosk. We last presented on this item in the subcommittee in September 2021. At that time, we heard feedback from the subcommittee that if we were to move forward with this effort, there were a few things to keep in mind. First, that this needs to be done at no cost to the city. Second, that these kiosks need to be functional and not a maintenance eyesore for the downtown residents and visitors. And finally, there was an interest that if these installations go well in the downtown area, to explore other locations outside of downtown for the potential expansion. Since then, we have worked through a procurement process that accommodates all of those requirements, and we think actually goes beyond to provide a real benefit to the city. This item before you is for possible action. That action would be to recommend City Council award a contract to the selected kiosk vendor and to approve an additional position to manage the kiosk contract with the cost of that position covered by the revenues provided by the kiosk vendor, and to authorize an exception to Phoenix City Code to allow off-site advertising in the public right-of-way. I'll review that again at the last slide, but with me today is Chris Ewell, our Deputy Director, Street Transportation Director, responsible for this effort. He'll be taking you through a majority of the presentation, but before I turn it over to Chris, I wanted to provide a brief background on what brought us here today. I should mention that kiosks in the downtown area are not a new concept. The downtown area had a kiosk for a number of years. These were managed by Downtown Phoenix, Inc. The information on the kiosks was digital and not easily changeable. They were static. They aged and ultimately needed to be removed. In early 2020, prior to the pandemic, we were approached by Downtown Phoenix, Inc. representatives to discuss the possibility of moving forward with a program to install digital into these kiosks. We are specific that this would be at no cost to the city and that these kiosks would hold up to our heat and climate. And the goal of this is to have 20 kiosks installed in operation in time for the Super Bowl in February 2023. We also provide an option within the procurement to expand kiosks beyond the downtown area as we opt to do that. I'll now turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Kini, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We did issue a competitive procurement in January. We did receive 2 proposals. We had a diverse evaluation panel that evaluated the RFPs that were submitted, the proposals. And IKE Smart City, otherwise known as ISC, was selected as the most responsive and responsible proposal. ISC has a long history with kiosks. They have over 200, or nearly 200, operating currently, with another 300 coming by the end of this year. They do have kiosks in Tempe, and they have not had any issues. Reference checks on ISC's performance noted that they were sound and that they could deliver in the time frame that we set. Some key things to remember: there will be no upfront or ongoing costs to the City of Phoenix. They will be installed in the public right-of-way, but those kiosks will be owned, maintained, and controlled by ISC. The contract term will be up to 10 years. And advertising currently is not allowed in the right-of-way, but we're asking for an exception to that, and we will follow established guidelines for advertising. Some of the benefit to the city: advertising is the key generator of revenue, and Phoenix will be given a share of that revenue as either 32% of the gross advertising or $14,000 per kiosk, with an increase after 5 years, as well as over $500,000 in advertising on other kiosks across ISC's markets. Additional benefit to the city is a certain percent, 12.5% of advertising set aside for city services, free directory listing of local businesses, and a discount to local businesses that are located within Phoenix and call that their headquarters. DPI is also being allowed to display on unsold advertising time in the downtown area. Some of the value added items that we noted in their proposal was they do offer shade panels with solar options, and we are exploring that. They are fully customizable for Phoenix's need, and that includes a maintenance plan, which includes cleaning of 5 days a week, and one of those being the weekend. Extra kiosks and parts, and on-site technicians, especially during the Super Bowl, and 24/7 support. And to date, ISC has not experienced a data breach. And I'll turn it back over to Keeney.
Thank you, Chris. So our recommendation, Madam Chair and subcommittee members, is a threefold recommendation here today. The first one is to enter an agreement with Ike Smart City LLC to provide digital kiosks in the downtown area. Approve one additional staff person to the Street Transportation Department funded with kiosk revenues to manage and administer the agreement, and to grant an exception to Phoenix City Code 3-8 to allow off-site advertising on digital kiosks in the public right-of-way. And if I should mention, if the subcommittee is supportive of this, we would be moving forward to a formal council agenda on May 11th for the action on these three items. With that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Keeney. I have one. I know we have a speaker. I have one quick question before I forget. So you stated that 12.5% of the revenues for the advertising would go to the city. Do you have any idea what that translates to dollars, or is it too soon to say because we really haven't established fees for advertising?
So Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the actual advertising revenue would be 32% of the gross advertising revenue would come to the city. We wanted to establish a minimum annual guarantee so we could count on any efforts we have to do to be able to manage and administer this contract. We wanted to have a dedicated source of revenue. That's why we had the minimum annual guarantee of $14,000 per kiosk, and that's what they asked for. But we anticipate that the 32% of gross advertising revenues, if everything goes right, will be actually higher than that $14,000 per kiosk.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We have one speaker before I take any comments from the subcommittee. Larry, could you introduce?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we have one speaker registered in support. Anna Berman, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. You may proceed.
Hello, my name is Anna Behrman. I'm actually with Ike Smart City, and I'm just here to first thank Chairwoman Stark, the members of the subcommittee, and city staff for this potential opportunity to bring Ike to Phoenix. I'm also here to answer any questions if they arise from the presentation, and we really appreciate your time and consideration on this item.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Are there any?
I just wanted to clarify one of the questions you had. You were talking about the 12.5%. So the 12.5% that you mentioned is actually of the total advertising time that's available on the kiosk. 12.5% would be dedicated to City of Phoenix content.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. So I had the numbers wrong.
No
Thank
worries.
you. Thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee? Great. Can I get?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Councilwoman O'Brien?
I appreciate all the information. Thank you, Keeney. How will we handle loitering by people who are not using the kiosk for its intended purpose?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman O'Brien, with people, we don't have, one couple of things we did do with the kiosks, we do have public Wi-Fi that we've asked for as being part of the kiosks, but we did not include charging stations. Some kiosks around the country do involve charging station. So with that, we hope that will deter some of the loitering that might happen around those kiosks, but we would also be working in partnership with Downtown Phoenix Inc. and with their ambassadors as well to work through any concerns or issues there might be with the improper use or improper gathering around those kiosks.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Any other questions? All right, can I get a motion
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, can I ask just one more question?
Sure. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I know it's about the kiosk, but I would like to look into creating an app for those that, I guess I consider kiosks now very archaic. And it's funny because I'm not all up on the latest technology, but I do know through COVID real quickly that a lot of us multi-generation families learned quickly how to use technology. So I would like to see an app created around downtown.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Pastor, was going to note that one of the things that Ike does offer is a app to go along with the kiosk. So that's something we will be working and keeping everybody informed on that as well.
That's
great. Very cool. All right. Well, I have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next is item 10, the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport Comprehensive Asset Management Plan. And I believe Chad's coming down with Jordan.
Well, good morning, Chairwoman Stark and members of the subcommittee. The Council approved the Comprehensive Asset Management Plan, or we call it CAMP for short, for Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport in 2019. And that plan accounted for nearly $6 billion worth of investments in the airport over the life of the plan. Given that plan utilized 2016 data and given the dramatic impacts that the COVID pandemic has had on the aviation industry in particular, we felt it was appropriate to revalidate the CAMP assumptions and projects to ensure that the near-term investments aligned with the highest priority needs for Sky Harbor Airport and the customers and the stakeholders that we serve. We also wanted to ensure near-term investments are stress-tested and that they're financially feasible based on our revenue forecasts that we expect. Today, I'd like to present to you the proposed updates to the CAMP that represent over $1.5 billion in investments over the next 5 years. Jordan Feld, Deputy Aviation Director over our planning team, has joined me today, and he's going to share a little bit more about the revalidation process and provide some highlights of the key near-term projects identified in the plan. Jordan?
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. The subcommittee will recall in 2019 we adopted a new master plan for Sky Harbor. The plan looked out 20 years and made recommendations for facility investment needed to accommodate long-term growth. As we began to implement CAMP in 2020, we had to quickly pivot due to the pandemic, and now with 3 years since the adoption and airport activity beginning to normalize, we wanted to revisit our presumptions, as Mr. Murkowski noted. So in the summer of 2021, we began the update process. We wanted to give you a little bit of background real quick. So CAMP had three major themes, the first being redevelop the underutilized portions of the terminal core to provide more terminal facilities, ensure long-term efficient cargo growth by relocating cargo to the north side where 100 acres were potentially available, and in doing so, free up the south side of the field for Air National Guard expansion. These key CAMP concepts hinged on trenching the Union Pacific Railroad and the expectation that the Air National Guard's new refuelers would be sited at Phoenix in the very near term. Today, we know the Union Pacific negotiation completion is unlikely in the next 5 years. Similarly, we know that the Air National Guard refuelers are unlikely to be sited in the next 5 years. So for this update process, we re-engaged technical stakeholders and provided numerous updates to our Aviation Advisory Board. Some examples of the key stakeholders are listed here. These stakeholders identified as their top concerns airfield efficiency and the need to detail more clearly enabling steps for key near-term projects, such as our new taxiway and developing the second New North Concourse at Terminal 3. The product of this update are these near-term priorities you can see here. Again, the majority of these projects are refinement of near-term projects called out in CAMP, but there are some new projects as well that we'll discuss very quickly here. On the whole, this CAMP update is very much an implementation study and less so a revision of CAMP.
So I'll focus on these 6 projects over the next few slides here, as these are the major projects we now expect to take on in the near term. So the first big project is the development of that second north concourse at Terminal 3 with a post-security connector to Terminal 4, meaning that between concourses of the 2 terminals you could move around without having to leave the secured area and come back in. So it's a tremendous time savings for our customers. We've updated our planning cost estimates that you can see here, and also looked at some variable options for the aircraft type and total positions, ranging from 5 to 9 gates. And so you can see, while the connector cost not very small, again, a real critical amenity to the flying public, our customers. One of the immediate needs was a detailed plan for relocating American Airlines cargo facilities, which are going to be impacted by that new north concourse. So we spent considerable amount of time with American developing this campus plan you see here at the east end of the airport, which is essentially their maintenance area. This concept not only accommodates their relocated facilities and growth within their own campus, but also helps with safety as it relocates the vehicle service road out of their active ramp area. Similar to the new north concourse, this concept should look somewhat familiar. By way of background, we don't have a cross-field taxiway west of Terminal 3 today. This creates bottlenecks throughout the airfield. So moving forward with this project is a critical near-term priority. However, there are several impacts from the new taxiway. In particular, the taxiway goes through cargo facilities and aircraft hold bays that need to be replaced before we can construct the taxiway. So this map is showing that we're able to achieve that. So to ensure no loss of cargo capacity, we worked with the cargo stakeholders to develop this concept, which provides like-for-like aircraft positioning, efficiency, and replacement of the lost cargo buildings immediately to the east of that new taxiway. This concept also ensures safe interaction and efficiency with the planned hard stand remote gate concept. You can see it just to the east there in the graphic from camp. And it's a good segue to the next project here. So speaking of that hard stand remote gate concept from camp, which you can see here in the red dash, through this update we identified the opportunity to repurpose some of the facilities in that area that weren't taken down with Terminal 2. So the idea here is to use, you can see this building here in yellow, to use this building to help stage passengers at the hard stand area that would essentially range in options. We could use this building as simply a hold room with bus connections to Terminal 3, and that would have a cost around $11 million. And we also want to look at maybe developing kind of a mini terminal that would have concessions and security and bag check, and that cost is probably closer to $18 million. Perhaps the most critical new concept identified during this update was the need for extending the center runway. FAA and airfield operators are concerned about the need to request the longest runway during departures due to recent FAA changes in safety requirements during extreme heat conditions, which the FAA considers 105 degrees, and I'll note that they're in Washington, D.C., not Phoenix. We obviously have a few more days than most at 105 degrees, so the unfortunate effect for us is that more traffic utilizes the north runway, which can do a couple things. It causes delay in our airfield system. It also places more overflight from the north runway over potentially noise-sensitive areas. So to mitigate this problem, we want to study the potential for extending the center runway to match the north runway. That will solve this problem. Given the surrounding conditions, the most effective approach is likely an extension of 800 feet to the west and about 400 feet to the east. This also helps us minimize any impacts to the Salt River. This project is also a new concept. It shows a potential roadway improvements that can be made to help traffic congestion now in the near term without impacting long-term facilities like the West Terminal, you'll recall from camp. So in addition to adding more turnaround lane near the west cell lots, this concept includes a complete realignment of westbound Sky Harbor Boulevard, and by doing so, increases the total lanes for eastbound Sky Harbor Boulevard traffic through the area at $13 million. It's relatively great investment for our customers, again, as we hear so often about the traffic congestion issues at the airport. And finally, we wanted to discuss studying the feasibility of a privately operated hotel, not at 24th Street in Buckeye, which Camp had recommended, but above Terminal 4. And you can see what we're talking about here. During camp, we issued an RFI for the 24th Street concept, and the results were not what we had hoped for. So we want to further look at this at T4. It's obviously a great opportunity to enhance revenue, bring in new tourism, and provide additional amenities for our customers. And it's not necessarily novel in the context of airports. Many of you are aware that a lot of airports all over the world, you're seeing some domestic examples here, have terminal hotels. Kind of wrapping up, for next steps, both the New North Concourse and the Crossfield Taxiway were included in the ongoing National Environmental Policy Act environmental assessment, or what we call EA, that we expect to complete later this summer. The runway extensions and the T2 support building reuse were not analyzed under NEPA yet, so we'll need to do that, and there's some additional technical studies we'll need to do for both those facilities. Similar to the runway extension, some additional modeling around the Sky Harbor Boulevard concepts will need to be done. And finally, from a programming perspective, we are excited, and we want to note the possibility of using 2021 Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Act monies to help fund these projects. So I wanted to quickly recognize the Phoenix Aviation Advisory Board for not letting CAMP become obsolete and embracing the idea that the CAMP is and should be a living document that grows with the airport and our community. I also want to thank the subcommittee today for their time and guidance on airport planning in general over the last few years. Staff's recommendation is to recommend to the City Council to direct staff to submit an updated airport layout plan to the Federal Aviation Administration for the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport Comprehensive Asset Management Plan as needed based on recent CAMP implementation planning. Thank you. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work on this. Are there any questions? Vice Mayor?
I have one question. It's not in camp, because I know this is an infrastructure internally within the within the boundaries of the airport. Outside of camp, I can't remember what it was called, but what's outside of camp where we also have land that is part of the airport?
Madam Chair, Councilperson Pastor, appreciate the question. So there's kind of two out or maybe three outside the fence planning areas as we think about it. The north side, which the long-range plan for the airport is still to expand in that area as it has been for 30 or 40 years. Immediately to the west of the airport is the business park, and then immediately to the west of that is the land reuse area.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is because I have been asked several times regarding the Greyhound area. And so this is not included in camp. So if maybe I make a request that all the outside areas, if possible, to come to the committee to then see what is programmed or planned. I do know that in one of the pieces that we are leasing, that a hotel is supposed to go there. So that's why the other reason why I'm asking is because we're considering possibly building a hotel in camp, and then there's another hotel possibly going right outside. So I want to see the holistic piece of the expansion.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, we'd be happy to come back to this subcommittee and give you a more expansive view of those parcels and the aviation's long-term plan for those parcels. We have excluded them out of the near-term plan as a result of our discussions with the Federal Aviation Administration. As they're embarking on their environmental review, we've identified some historic and other culturally sensitive properties in the area north of the railroad and adjacent to the railroad that need further exploration before we can pursue long-term development of those parcels. But we would love to discuss with you what the short and mid-term opportunities might be for those parcels.
Okay, and then what I want to follow up on that. My follow up on that piece regarding FAA. I believe a lot of these land, a lot of this land has to be approved by FAA. Is correct? And
Madam Chair and Vice Mayor, yes, and it depends on how the parcels are acquired, whether they're acquired with federal funds or with Aviation Department local funds. And in many cases, because federal funding is involved, there is a release required before we can dispose of the parcels. But that would not preclude us from, pursuing short-term leases, for example, on those parcels, and as we do today with many of the parcels north of the railroad.
okay, because I'm leading to a question. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh, no.
If the Coyotes piece is accepted by the FAA, I think there's a strong collective, and we could talk to Councilman Garcia, but I believe that there's a strong collective on our council that would like to go back to FAA and possibly do some housing in the areas where housing used to exist. And so I think we can have that long-term discussion, but I'm planting the seed because I believe that that discussion is going to be coming. And I would like to know from our committee sake to have some knowledge as to what's the process, and what is it that we need to do in order to ask those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the future item, you want to update on the surrounding properties and also to see if we could reestablish some housing, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Perfect. Yes, Councilwoman Gardardo, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The R is hard.
I know.
Well, thank you so much for that, Chad. I think the plan is exciting. I'm happy to see, because I know there was a moment where a lot of this stuff was put on hold. So I'm happy to see a lot of this coming back. I think that's exciting. But with that, I think that I know there's a lot of communities in that area, that are very invested in what's happening at the airport. And then my question to you is, are you planning on doing public meetings for folks to be able to come in and give their feedback on what they think about the plan? And is that something that you guys are planning on doing?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council Member, appreciate the question. So there's a couple of technical studies we still need to do on these new projects to refine them. But then, correct, once we have a good feel for how the FAA needs to review them, we'll go out to the public as well. Generally, through our NEPA process, we're going to hold at least 2 public workshops, one on the front end to understand the community's concerns with new projects, and then on the back end to kind of walk them through the mitigations for what their concerns were. So the public will see this at least 2 more times in a technical setting, of course, in addition to all the advisory board updates that we've been doing with public input.
Great. And then as we're moving into these projects, and hopefully once it's all approved, I think Chad, you know this firsthand, how good quality jobs all around the project are incredibly important to me as we continue to put a lot of money into homelessness, rightfully so. I think that we need to continue to do our part on the other end, on making sure that we continue to create jobs in our city that are quality jobs. So I'm just hopeful that you keep that in mind as you're moving forward. All of this sounds very exciting, and I want to be very supportive of all of this. But we need to make sure that as we're thinking about construction, as we're thinking about the different things that are coming into this project, also figuring out how is it that we give our constituents, the opportunities to be able to do some of these jobs and, continue to lift everyone at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, so can I get a motion then?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
It carries unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is consideration of a citizen petition related to the process for preparing formal council meeting agendas. And the next one is the consideration of citizen petition related to process for handling citizen petitions. Were you going to speak to both of them at the same time or address them independently?
Madam Chair, we can do either one.
Why don't we take them separately and then give the petitioner 5 minutes for his comments.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'm Denise Archibald, the City Clerk, and with me on this item today is David Benton, Chief Counsel with the Law Department. And item 11 is an item for the consideration of a citizen petition related to the process for preparing council meeting agendas. The petition was submitted by Jeremy Thacker at the February 16th City Council formal meeting. The petitioner requests the City Council to allow residents to put items on a council agenda, specifically that public comments submitted prior to the deadline of the council's choosing to be added to the agenda to allow for the possibility of discussion and citizen engagement. Currently, the City of Phoenix public meetings are regulated by and comply with Arizona revised statutes, Arizona open meeting laws, and the city charter, city code, and administrative regulations. The city charter requires the City Council to act by resolution, ordinance, franchise, or formal action, and this is done primarily during formal council meetings. The process of getting an item on a formal council agenda is controlled and provided by the city charter, city code, and administrative regulations, and provides the authority to the city manager to place items on the agenda, which he does by authorizing staff to place items on the agenda to request approval of specific items, for example, to execute a contract or to change city code language. The city code also establishes that the mayor, or at least 3 council members, may request for the city manager to place an item on the agenda. Therefore, only the city manager, the mayor, or at least 3 council members have authority to put items on the formal agenda. Setting agendas and conducting meetings in this manner allows for a large volume of city business to efficiently be conducted during each meeting. Currently, residents have several opportunities to present items to the council for discussion and for citizen engagement. In addition to the citizen petition process, which is how this particular item got onto this agenda, residents can provide comments to the City Council on published agenda items, and council members can consider those comments, ask questions, or request additional details as needed. Residents can also address the council on any topic during citizen comment portion of the formal council meeting, and although the council may not respond during the meeting, the council can ask for staff to review the matter or to ask for the matter to be placed on a future agenda. Residents can also reach out to and discuss items directly with individual council offices, and the city also frequently gathers public input through other means such as surveys, public hearings designated for the purpose of getting input, for example, budget hearings. And with that, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, we're happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
So Denise, in reading the citizens petition, I think what the concern is how does a constituent or a resident of Phoenix be able to put something on the agenda? I think that's really where the heart is. And how do they have the ability, other than a 3-person memo, which the council has to have 3 people, and other than, well, the city manager can place it on there, but how does the citizen or resident have the ability to put something on the agenda?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, currently the city code outlines that, as discussed and as you mentioned correctly, that the city manager has the ability to add it to the agenda, or the mayor or 3 council members. Therefore, if a citizen is looking for something to get onto the agenda, they can either during citizen comments, for example, at the formal council meeting, address the council directly on an item. And if the council so wishes, then can direct staff to either place that item on a future agenda or to basically address the item directly with the person. Persons can also communicate with their council members directly, and then a council member can attempt to put it on the agenda as well. And sometimes persons also communicate with the departments directly, and if the department's already working on something like that, for example, then things can also get an agenda that way.
Okay, or it could get agendized in a subcommittee also, right?
Correct, exactly. The chair or the members of the subcommittee can also wish to hear about something and ask staff to put something on the agenda. And so if a resident has already communicated with one of the members of the subcommittee, then that could prompt the item to be placed on the agenda.
And we are not allowed, as you stated earlier, we aren't allowed to respond to citizens' comments due to the open meeting law?
Correct. Only items that are placed on the agenda can be discussed by the council, and therefore if something is brought up during citizen comments that was not placed on the agenda originally, then the council cannot respond in that moment. But the city council can ask staff to address the issue or to place it on a future agenda.
And if we respond, then we can be fined, I want to say it's $5,000 or more.
I will defer that question to David Benton.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, I'm not sure the exact amount, but there is a fine associated with violations of the open meeting law. Yes, there are.
Okay. The reason why I know the fine is because Councilwoman O'Brien and I sit on a public school board, which is very much regulated around open meeting law. So that's why I had the number in my head. I read the simple solution, and one of the areas, and I don't know if you could help me in this, the city is not committing to respond to any comments, but at least would have a choice to respond if they got a wild hair. The city would have to add a subject section to the register to speak page on the website so the citizen could provide enough detail to meet the agenda item requirements. The sole burden of the meeting, the deadline, and providing specific details would rest on the citizen. That's not possible. And if not, why not? That's on the citizen's petition.
Vice Mayor, thank you for the question. It's not possible, for one, because the city code only provides the authority to place things on the agenda currently to, as mentioned, the city manager and the mayor and the 3 council members. Additionally, it would be challenging to have items placed on the agenda in terms of the formal meeting because, as I mentioned, the formal meeting and the purpose of that meeting is to conduct city business. And as you know, we have on any agenda anywhere between 80 and 120 items currently. And that purpose of that meeting is for the council to approve things through resolutions, franchises, and formal actions as required by the city charter. Therefore, the best option for residents to be able to discuss things with their council members and get them onto an agenda would be to mention these during citizen comments, and if the council so wishes, to put it on a future agenda or to approach a council office directly or in any other opportunities that they may find that we have available for residents as well.
And I'm just doing the questions because I'm being proactive for the citizen. How do you change the charter?
Well, this provision in terms of who can put items on the agenda is a city code. And so the city code would have to be changed by the council. The charter.
By the council.
Correct.
By the council. It's the code that is done by the council and the charter is done by the voters, correct?
Correct. If we were to change something in the charter, it would be done by a vote, by an election.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, and thank you, Vice Mayor. I would say that we have had items that really came through a 3-person memo, such as a few years ago with street improvements. We had quite outcry from the public that we needed to advance funds to try to get some of our roads paved, and so a letter was done. So there are ways that citizens can make a difference, but it is rather a few steps to take to get there. Any other comments before we have Jeremy speak?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilwoman O'Brien.
For David, related to the simple solution of just adding a subject, is it as simple as just having a member of the public say they want to talk about streets, or does that need to be, does more detail need to be given?
Madam Chair, Council Member, according to Jeremy Thacker's citizen petition and how he's shaped it, it would be that simple. I think in more practical terms, there'd probably have to be some staff review, some background associated with it, some additional information associated with it, so that the council, in the event we wanted to go that direction, wanted to speak to or put that item on the agenda. I think there's a lot more to it than that.
So from a legal perspective, there would need to be more details and information so that the public would be properly noticed about an item, which is why the city goes through the process they do when we agendize items. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Council Member, that is correct. We would have to put some more detail on there so that the open meeting law requirements could be adhered to. We have to give all members of the public enough information to know what the issue is that's going to be either discussed or decided upon by the public body. So the answer to your question is yes.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Why don't we have Jeremy speak? Mr. Thacker, are you online?
I am.
Thank you. You have
Good
5
morning.
minutes. Good morning. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. 1,038 days, 25 public meetings, 3 citizen petitions, 1,500 emails, 1,000 plus hours, and tens of thousands in legal fees. That's the investment that I've made for the opportunity for the first time today to potentially have a two-way conversation with the council. As stated earlier, city staff believes that the amount of time, energy, and resources I've invested using the current adequate methods of interacting with the council is reasonable. I, on the other hand, tend to believe it's a tad bit excessive, especially considering the fact that I'm still not addressing the full council. I'm still not discussing the subject matter that is important to me, and I'm still not guaranteed a two-way conversation. So the current process, and while I appreciate that this is trying to be made about putting something on the agenda, which that's the formal process, this is really about communication and that process for public comment. So prior to Mayor Gallego taking office, public comments took place at the beginning of the city council meetings. City council approved the suggestion to move the comments to the end of the meetings. And what I'd like to look at are some of the facts associated with that and the effects of that. So the average formal city council meeting lasts 2 hours, while some of those meetings can be up to 5. So prior to these changes by Mayor Gallego, a citizen would spend, at a best case scenario, 10 minutes to make a public comment of their time, in total. Worst case scenario, maybe 30 minutes. After these changes, the best case scenario now is that for a citizen to address the council, they've got to invest 2 hours of their time, as I have this morning. Worst case scenario, 5 hours. Both the best and worst case scenarios require 10 times the amount of time for citizens than before the change. And that's only half of the story, literally half. The current process doesn't allow the council to communicate with citizens regarding public comments. In the rare circumstance where council members request the citizen's issue be placed on a future agenda, the citizen is now obligated to another 2 to 5 hour investment of their time. So as it stands, a citizen in a best case scenario today is required to allocate 4 to 10 hours of their time if they expect to have a conversation with the city council that lasts 5 minutes. So what's the solution? It is a simple solution. Allow the possibility of city council interaction with the citizen at the time of comment by simply adding to the agenda any public comment request submitted 72 hours in advance and containing the proper amount of detail to meet the OML requirements. So the city has stated that a couple of negative impacts that I want to address. That this would delay and disrupt the regular conduct of city business without offering a single example of how or why it would. They just stated again that, you know, this is about business. Citizen comments are already on the agenda. This isn't new. This is just making it more effective. The other place they say is prior to placing an item on the agenda, staff must follow administrative regulations to ensure agenda items are properly formatted and vetted. Here is what the requirements in the ARS say about in the open meeting law. Agendas must be available at least 24 hours before the meeting. Agendas must contain information reasonably necessary to inform the public of the matters to be discussed or decided. What? Is this the formatting and vetting that will cause delay and disruption, leading to pandemonium and chaos throughout the city, thus justifying the additional 2 to 5 hours of each citizen's time that decides to make a public comment? Or is this might be better described as a task that could be almost completely automated and require a few minutes of an intern or admin's time per meeting while not wasting hours and hours of citizens' time? So the other effect I want you to think about is that the changes have been made to the public comments. The average number of comments as prior to Mayor Gallego making these changes was 9 public comments per meeting. The last 6 months of formal meetings have had an average of 2. That is a chilling effect. They've been reduced by almost 75% of the total. So I believe that the actions of this council speak much louder than the words of the politicians. Today's actions will speak volumes about the commitment to citizen engagement by each of you.
Thank you. So just as a follow-up question, what you're suggesting is that if someone puts it in writing 72 hours prior to the agenda, then we perhaps can have that conversation with a public member. Could you use an example for me, Jeremy?
Sure. So if I were to submit right now, the process is that I have to go to the city council page for meetings and I sign up to speak. I enter my information in there the same way. Instead of now you just add a subject field that allows me to say that I'd like to speak about shutting down the city's municipal golf courses due to water usage and cost and inequity. And then the city manager and city clerk would approve to put that, they would put that on the agenda. I'm not putting that item on the agenda. I'm just suggesting the item be put on the agenda. And it would still go through the same process that it has been. But now during the citizen comments, when I make my comment, now the city council at least has the ability to ask me questions about it. We could have a back and forth discussion because it's been put on the agenda. It doesn't require anyone to ask questions. It doesn't require, and it doesn't enable further comment. It simply allows for a discussion instead of prohibiting it and forcing citizens to waste hours and hours of time potentially to go to another meeting.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of Jeremy? I might ask staff if they have any thoughts or any comments on what Mr. Thacker is suggesting, just from a perspective of managing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think when it comes to logistics of how these items are placed on the agenda, for one, the agenda packet is released a week prior When it comes to items that are getting onto an agenda, staff prepare the items approximately 1 month in advance. They start submitting their reports, and they're being reviewed, and they're finalizing them. Then 1 week prior to the agenda itself, or prior to the meeting, then we release the packet for the public to review. I think a couple challenges would include, for one, in this scenario, for example, that was provided, where someone wants to submit an agenda item to say to shutting down the municipal golf courses, 72 hours would not be adequate for staff, for example, to be ready or prepared to address that issue potentially. Additionally, when this item does come up, and if the idea is for there to just be an exchange, then I do think that there would be a challenge with open meeting law in terms of figuring out what things the council could actually address or not address, depending on how specific the person actually was or was not. And so that is a really big challenge. The council would have to be real careful, or there may be portions of the discussion that lead down a path that would violate open meeting law due to the fact that the specificity of the item may not have been sufficient. So I think between those two challenges, in addition to the fact that then our agendas potentially could grow, of course, at this point, in addition to just seeking from the council approval for, franchises, resolutions, and things that have been priorly discussed, typically at a subcommittee, vetted all the way through, presented by the department, and there's been a long process coming before it gets to formal council. Now we would have a lot of different items on the agenda that would then be discussed potentially, but with no time for preparation or any of that vetting from a logistics standpoint, and potentially options for violations to open meeting law.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, you have a question?
Yeah. In our subcommittee meetings, it says future agenda items. And so I actually have never paid, I believe there is no item on that on the formal. So if we hear a citizen in the public comment, I'll stay in the public comment arena, requesting something, then a response from us could be on our future agenda item to say, we would like to discuss this. I feel like we need to figure out how we engage our community and how they do participate on items that they want to discuss. There really isn't a platform for them to say, I would really like the council to discuss this. Because it's all determined on the chair, the city manager, and the mayor of what a chair of the committee of what gets on the agenda or not. The other piece is, I understand the staff process, and items are a month in advance, and boom, boom, boom. But that's our internal process. What is the public's process to really have what I'm hearing from Jeremy, a dialogue about a subject that he wants to talk about? And so I'm not really sure what the solution is to that.
Chairwoman?
Yes. Councilwoman O'Brien?
Is Jeremy still on the line?
He should be.
I am.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, I'm going to use your golf course example. So I'm presuming you'd like to have the golf courses discussed by the council, and I would ask what steps you took or have taken to have your council person or council people bring this to an agenda.
Are you asking what steps I have taken?
Yes.
I've reached out to all of the city council members' offices on multiple occasions. I've sent emails to all offices. I've had conversation. Chairperson Stark has had a meeting with me, and we discussed it prior to finding out that it wasn't going to be put on a agenda. So lots. I met with I presented a formal proposal to park staff. I got a put on the agenda by the chairperson of the Parks Board, only to have it taken off by the city staff without after the meeting happened. So there's been lots of steps.
So, Chairwoman and Vice Mayor, I think part of my concern with this request is that the request is to agendize an item on the formal city council meeting. And formal city council meetings, and correct me if I'm wrong, are for the approval of items, as Denise stated at the beginning. We are paying vouchers, we're approving a multitude of items, anywhere planning and development, right? All of those things, versus what I hear this to be, if it's to be a discussion or an opportunity for a citizen to request an item and provide information that they want to discuss, but in a time frame that does not allow, because my fear is staff then does not have the time to provide our information or to do the research we would need to have a thorough conversation of any topic. So that was my first concern.
Yeah. Can I clarify? The request is for any public meeting, not for the formal city council meetings alone. So that's, if you read the actual request, my petition is for all public meetings, just to clarify. So even I do agree with you. The process should be that there are subcommittees and boards for this reason that handle specifics, and then it comes up to the formal meetings. But yeah, that's the request.
Thank you for that clarification, Jeremy. I still have concerns with the 72-hour time frame, and to ensure, if the purpose is to just hear from a citizen, you're not able to have a proper back and forth without having all the proper information. And it's not that information from a citizen isn't proper, but we need to make sure that there is information from staff, or we're able to do our own research as well. So having said that, Chairwoman, I believe there might be an opportunity for more discussion around this item.
I would agree. I think the idea the Vice Mayor brought up about better use of our subcommittees makes sense. For example, an issue with regards to a golf course might be better suited the subcommittee that oversees parks. So I think there is some room for additional dialogue.
So could we continue this item?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Sorry.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we continue it and maybe have a further discussion? Vice Mayor, I see you want to say something, but perhaps talk a little bit more about the use of subcommittees as a venue.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that I guess what I'm saying, if we continue it, will we be able to have the dialogue, or do we just give a directive to staff as to what information we will need to make a decision? And so that's where I'm just kind of, kind of processing this whole.
Yeah, and so maybe let staff do some more research, and then after they give us some suggestions, we can put it back on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Why don't we do that so we can give them more time to look into that? Thank you.
So do we need a form? Oh, sorry. Do we need a formal motion to continue?
Yeah, why don't we just make that in the form of a motion?
I move to continue this item to a future meeting when we can get information and direct staff to provide us with information on available options to handle citizens' requests.
I have a second.
Second.
All right. All in
Madam
favor, say
Chair,
aye.
Madam Chair,
Aye.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Excuse me.
This is Mario. I'm sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair, but for a continuance, we do need a specific date so we can know which date to bring it back. So May 18th is a possibility, or we also, for the meeting in June, could do June 15th.
Why don't we push it to June 15th to give you guys some time?
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Next item. Consideration of citizen petition related to process for handling citizen petitions. Staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. The petitioner, in this case is Jeremy Thacker, submitted a petition on March 2nd at the City Council formal meeting. The petitioner requests that the council provide clarification on the city's current process for handling citizen petitions. In response, Mr. Thacker has been provided with the procedures for citizen petition process dated December 21st of 2021, which outlines the process and qualifications for citizen petitions. Additionally, Mr. Thacker's request had a series of questions. Mr. Thacker requested to know, for example, whether a petition can be disqualified for any of the following reasons: for lack of jurisdiction, the request is an illegal or unconstitutional action, or an existing process for the request exists. According to the procedures for processing citizen petitions, petitions can be disqualified for lack of jurisdiction and or if the request is illegal or unconstitutional action. Regarding whether the petition can be disqualified if the existing process exists for that particular request would depend on the specific circumstances of the particular case. Mr. Thacker also requested to know whether a decision by staff or the mayor to assign the petitions to a subcommittee, board, or body without the city council's approval violates the city charter or city code. The authority to assign matters to be heard by subcommittees, and the mayor has assigned the review of citizen petitions to this subcommittee. Additionally, Mr. Thacker inquired whether a decision by staff or mayor without a vote from the council to assign a petition to a body other than the full city council qualifies as an action by the council within 15 days. And subcommittee members, the council acted by adopting Section 2-60, Rule 5 of the City Code, giving the mayor authority to manage city subcommittees. And the mayor has assigned the hearings for citizen petitions to this subcommittee. And the procedures for citizen petitions determines how the petitions are handled under the regular course of business, which includes that if a petition is properly submitted, the law department decides whether or not a petition qualifies for action, and if the petition qualifies, then it is assigned to this subcommittee, all of which occurs within 15 days of submittal of the formal council meeting. Lastly, Mr. Thacker asked if a violation has occurred, what remedy to those who were damaged by the violations and what the consequences are for those responsible for the violations. However, for this question, it would measure authority to enforce provisions of the city code, but remedies or penalties for violating state laws, federal laws, or the Constitution would depend on the circumstances of an appropriate adjudication. And with that, myself or David Benton are here to provide answers to questions.
Any questions, comments? Why don't we then hear from Jeremy? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's start with the definition and rules of the citizen petitions. According to the Charter, Chapter 4, Section 22, any citizen of the city may appear before the council at any regular meeting and present a written petition. Such petition shall be acted upon by the council in the regular course of business within 15 days. That is what it says about citizen petitions. So I think while I've got several issues with the city's interpretation of the statute, I believe we should focus on the second part of the sentence. and specifically the phrase, shall be acted upon by council. So what does it mean for the council to act? The charter earlier in the same chapter at section 8 tells us what it means for the council to act. Council shall act only by resolution, ordinance, franchise, or formal recorded action. Then at section 10, it provides more detail on what council means. The affirmative vote of the majority of the members of council shall be necessary to pass an ordinance, franchise, resolution, or formal recorded action. So if we take those definitions of council and action and we insert them into the citizen petition verbiage, we get any citizen of the city may appear before the council at any regular meeting and present a written petition. A majority of the members of the city council shall vote whether to approve, deny an ordinance, resolution, franchise, or formal recorded action regarding the petition in the regular course of business within 15 days. So the question is, are citizen petitions currently being voted on by a majority of the council members within 15 days of submission? Let's look at some background. In 2019, Mayor Gallego issued a memo to council and city staff assigning citizen petitions to subcommittee. This was not done at a public meeting and was not approved by the city council. In turn, for the first time in the city's entire history, the city changed the way that citizen petitions were handled. Up until then, citizen petitions, regardless of legality, jurisdiction, or current process, were added to the next formal agenda. Staff would create a report for city council, and at the next meeting, the issue was heard by a majority of the council and voted upon if action was requested by the petitioner. The city now wants us to accept their interpretation that 75 days after submission of a petition, like mine, the minority of the council will decide whether the majority of the council will ever hear the petition. And they say that that qualifies as acted upon by council within 15 days. It doesn't take a lawyer to figure out that the rules and current process don't reconcile. And if that were the end of it, but it is not. It doesn't end there, because they also must comply with the OML requirements requiring all actions by a body occur at public meeting. Since the only recent actions taken that would possibly meet the requirements of action defined by the charter would result in a violation of the OML, city staff now claims that a completely unrelated decision to allow the mayor to create subcommittees made over 25 years ago by a city council not containing one member of the current council qualifies as an action within 15 days on a future petition unknown by anyone at the time? What? Like, how does that even possibly make sense? So then they also claim that it can't be within jurisdiction. Well, my golf petition was declined due to lack of jurisdiction. My request was to shut down golf courses, which would reduce rates from whatever they are now to zero, sell the land, and rebudget the money. Well, Parks Board doesn't have jurisdiction to do any of that. They lack jurisdiction to take legal action on any of those items. Yet my petition was denied because of a jurisdiction which is not even in the charter's definition or statute regarding citizen petitions. So the real question here is, regardless of the committee's decision today, this issue doesn't end here, because the ramifications of this type of violation are legal and will need to be addressed in the Arizona Superior Court. But the question for each of you today is not whether the mayor and city staff have violated charter, code, and OML. They have. The question is whether you will be complicit and potentially liable as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Chair.
Yes, Vice Mayor?
Actually, I think there were some good valid there are valid points on some of the statements that Mr. Thacker said. He did ask several questions, and so I would like legal to be able to answer those questions.
Mr. Benton?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, just as some backdrop, me and Mr. Thacker have had numerous conversations about this over several months, and he's asked me many of those questions, and it boils down to his disagreement with legal's analysis of how the citizen petition process is being deployed by council these days. He has summarily concluded that it's all illegal. So, and that's fine. My response to him in many respects was the council has decided by way of approval of the code, so it was council action, deciding that the person that's going to be managing the subcommittees is the mayor. That's actually in the code. And in so doing, the mayor has decided to assign citizen petitions that come in to now TIP. Before it was another subcommittee. And when it comes to subcommittee, staff is able to go through the various and sundry parts of the petition, determine if it qualifies, and there are criteria upon which we use to decide that a petition qualifies, and one of them is specifically whether council has jurisdiction over the subject matter requested in the petition. If it does not, we have decided in the past that that particular petition does not qualify as a citizen petition, but that does not mean that the issue is dead. It could be addressed in other ways. Once a petition is decided to be as qualified, it is additionally vetted, researched, and eventually put on the subcommittee, this particular subcommittee, for further discussion and action by this body. So Mr. Thacker has raised these issues and has concluded that the process I so described is a violation of both the charter and the open meeting law. And just by virtue, that is his opinion. I disagree with it because we have looked at this in some detail to determine that we are in compliance with the charter as well as we're acting in compliance with the Arizona open meeting laws. We haven't found any and decided that anything we're doing is in violation of the open meeting law. There's no particular meetings that are being conducted that would be in violation of open meeting law. There's no formal actions that are being conducted by any bodies that would be a violation of the open meeting law. So the totality of the process and the systems we're conducting surrounding the citizen petitions are in compliance with both the open meeting law and the charter. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
I would like you to answer the question specifically about the majority of the council voting on citizen petitions and then now the minority of the council.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, the process that the council has decided to go about addressing citizen petitions, they decided that the mayor is going to address these particular citizen petitions, and the mayor has that authority to assign them to a subcommittee. There's two things going on here, and I think Mr. Thacker doesn't particularly look at the entire charter language. We take care of these citizen petitions within 15 days of our regular business. And part of our regular business is, as the council has decided and given the authority to the mayor to manage our subcommittees. The mayor has decided to assign citizen petitions to the subcommittees, and the subcommittees are the bodies that are addressing the citizen petitions as they come in. In my view, council has decided by way of their council decision in Chapter 2, subsection 2.2-60, I think it's Rule 5, I believe, that they have decided that this is how it's going to go. So I think the entire council has decided that this is the process we're going to use to address citizens' petitions. I think it's probably short-sighted to say that now only a small part of the council, because council certainly has an authority to decide how they're going to do this, and it doesn't always have to be the same way they did it before. They can certainly change the way they've done things, and I know Mr. Thacker has raised that in the past, citizens' petitions were addressed in this way or that way. Those are we're not locked into that precedent. We can change the way we're doing things if we think things can be done in a better way or a more efficient way or a more timely way. So there's a lot of things that are going on here, members of the subcommittee. So
Chairwoman?
Yes, Councilwoman O'Brien?
Thank you so much. David, could you tell me the charter? You just made a reference to the charter.
Yeah, what's the number?
Could you repeat that? I apologize.
The code section I had mentioned was Chapter 2, Section 2-60, Rule 5. The particular charter provision, I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it, Cynthia?
So it was a code. It was code, not charter.
Yeah, that was a code. That's correct. The charter provision is Chapter 4, Section 22.
Okay.
Are there any other comments? Yes, Vice Mayor?
I would like a briefing on all of this, and I would also like the code and the chapter.
Yes,
Thank you.
of course. Yes, of course.
Chairwoman?
Yes.
I would move to, oh my gosh, the words just left my head. I apologize. To continue this item to our June meeting as well.
Okay. And that way everyone can be briefed. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Oh, I think we did. Do we get a second?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Vice
didn't. I
Mayor.
apologize. Aye.
Okay. It carries unanimously. That's all our items today. We have next on the agenda, call to the public.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we do not have any members of the public registered to speak for call to the public.
And last is future agenda items. We have the one on the airport and the 2 cases that we're continuing. Are there any others? Then we stand adjourned. Thank you.
People with money to buy a home there, and palm trees was the one way of doing that. The price of palm trees was only about 50 to 75 cents at that point, so he could buy tons of them and plant them and serve his purpose of drawing rich people to those subdivisions, and it really